from exec session. That moves us to agenda item 4, which is communications. And on my list tonight, I have up first CFT, Mr. Sitch.
Hey, good evening, everybody. I just wanted to let you know that staff received a communication from Dr. Zola a little over an hour ago. So what I'm about to say represents CFT's thoughts a little bit prior to that communication, but I hope that, and we in CFT hope that this statement will be considered a part of the conversation moving forward that was referenced in said communication. So I'm here tonight to present a few concerns with the new plan and to highlight some important considerations for our pre-K-5 teachers. The situation is far from perfect in virtual learning, but the teachers are working their hardest to provide the best possible education for our students during this time. That said, we also recognize that virtual learning has not been easy on students and families either. We understand that there are those in our community who would like the school to return in some in-person instruction. There are teachers who feel exactly the same, a lot of them. We understand the urgency in needing to return in a return to in-person plan. In fact, from the minute the decision to go remote was determined this past fall, CFT began asking how this in-person return could be possible. We encouraged the district to determine which staff could and should come to work. We encouraged the district to give families, staff a plan to consider when making that decision. For example, this could be that plan. We encouraged the district to give the district to try and find a way to get some students back full-time. While doing so, we fully understood that a plan like that would require teacher changes, possible reassignments, schedule changes, etc. We were prepared to work through that. We were also in complete agreement with the district that many teachers wanted to and are capable of coming back. Despite all that, when we heard that this was the plan, we were surprised to say the least. We had no idea this was coming. To repeat, we really had no idea that this was coming. We did not expect to hear that an entire group of educators would be called back without consideration of the ramifications of that decision. Maybe they were. It was the exact sort of decision and move that I think has plagued the district, creating significant mistrust and division between teachers, administration, and even within the community. So you might be wondering, how could we have no idea that this was coming? All of our discussions with the administration prior to this gave us the impression that there might be the possibility for some staff and students to return full-time to in-person instruction. Needless to say, we were surprised then when the administration presented us with a hybrid model for all of staff returning. Previously, we'd explained that the hybrid model would be the most cumbersome and impractical to implement, even citing examples of nearby school districts attempting to do just that. To be clear, we understand that a plan that would allow for full-time in-person learning would have also created administrative and logistical issues. It may have required some reassignments from non-classroom teachers into classrooms. It could create resentment and division even. It would have given in-school learners a better shot at learning, though. It would have allowed teachers to focus their energies. This plan, though, the one that we're presented with, seems to be easier to implement from the district administrative perspective, but maybe impossible to navigate from an educational one. One of the justifications for the plan is that it will meet the educational needs of many of our students who are currently struggling with virtual education. Yet we know when students return in person, there will need to be time built into the day for reviewing procedures, hand washing, dismissal, etc., which will make the time actually spent learning to be considerably less than 2.5 hours. While the virtual learners continue as they've done, the in-person learners will spend a lot of time covering content as they navigate the new procedures. Less time covering content as they navigate the new procedures of being at school. We're worried about the extent to which students will get access to educational opportunities, though we are confident our teachers can make it happen. So if we think this through, in-person learners could fall behind the virtual learners because they'll spend time learning new routines, they won't get the full 2.5 hours of instruction, the gap between what can be covered between each group will continue to grow, and essentially elementary teachers will be required to pull off 3 significant feats: plan for in-person learning during a pandemic, a different plan for virtual learners who will be ahead of those in person, and a plan for the 2.5 hours of at-home instructional activities, and plan and consider delayed distance learners. The plan being presented by administration seems to appease maybe those in the community that would like their students to be in person. We aren't convinced at this point that it'll educate their students. And to be clear, we recognize that virtual instruction just isn't cutting it for many of our students. And that is something I feel deeply on a personal level, but we see it and hear about it from our members and our families. So yes, in-person plan is necessary, but we think it can be better than this one. So we have to acknowledge this monumental task, and this plan places a significant burden on our elementary teachers in terms of planning for 3 educational opportunities. But that doesn't even put a dent into all the other expectations placed upon them. What about meetings with admin, coordinating schedules with SPED, ELL, instructional coaches, specialist teachers, navigating IEP meetings, attending their collabs, being present for their strategic plan committees, communicating with families and preparing materials, and the myriad other tasks teachers do every day? Something's going to give. Given the fact that our pre-K 5 members are going to be asked to do 2 jobs, maybe 3, and given that they're going to be burdened with decisions that their colleagues at the secondary level will not, like whether to take leave or not, and given that they will be asked to be part of the COVID experiment, we in the union will work collectively to create an equitable solution, determine next steps, and/or pursue appropriate compensation for our members. To put this in perspective for you, while we were disappointed that the district did not choose to survey teachers about this specific return to school plan, we went ahead and collected some data of our own after the plan was released. We received feedback from 320 pre-K 5 members. There are about 440 total from our estimation. 87% of those who responded think the plan is insufficient. Almost 3/4 think the plan is unreasonable, but with 1/4 thinking that it's reasonable with some adjustments. Just 10% of our pre-K 5 members who responded would be willing to return without any concern, while almost double that number indicated that they'd be seeking leave options for the second quarter with the plan as presented. That last number is 53 people. That could be devastating to the plan. We can't afford to lose 53 people at the pre-K level and still make this work, pre-K 5 level and make this work. And before we decide that these individuals just don't want to work, it's important to remember that this is about childcare. This is about living in different towns where schools are operating on different schedules. This is about making choices during a pandemic about the health and well-being of themselves and their families. And this is about work-life balance. It is a relief to know, and it really is, that this will be part of the conversation moving forward. Because that certainly isn't how it felt to our members when we saw it last Friday. So in closing, and to be clear, at no point has CFT said we do not think we should have staff return in person with students. We know the need exists for our families, our students, and even for a lot of our teachers. This plan, though, is just not sustainable. We love this town, we love these schools. There are situations all over the country right now where communities are crumbling over the schooling question. Regardless of your political ideology, your affiliation, or your attitudes, we can't allow that to happen here. And so it was at this point that I was hoping I could open up the meeting for conversation and discourse, but I understand that's not allowed. So again, I just want to close in saying that, just like we said in April, CFT leadership remains more than willing to discuss in multiple forums, under multiple conditions, with multiple stakeholders, including community members at the table, so that we can get what we need and get done what we need moving forward. So, thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Mike, would you email those comments if you can? That'd be great. Thank you. Up next is PTA Council, Christy McDuffie.
That is a hard act to follow, but I will do my best. Hi, everyone. I'm Christy McDuffie. I am the PTA Council Treasurer. I'm also going to speak to the second quarter reopening plan. Even though this is a quick turnaround since the information came out on Friday, we have been collecting some feedback as much as possible to also try to speak to that since the plan intimated it would be moving very fast. So first of all, thank you all for how much work this is involved, and to everyone, the administrators, teachers, families out there that are doing all this work, the students and the board. It's a no-win situation, and so I know how difficult this is. And so the feedback that we are getting is, of course, not all aligned because family situations are so different. But nonetheless, I'm going to try and just read out some bullet points that we have collected. So first and foremost, parents are really, and when I say parents, I do mean collectively caregivers. Just bear with me. I understand they aren't always parents. However, parents do not want teacher changes. There is a lot of anxiety and upsetness out there about the idea of teacher changes, given that we are already in a situation where there's so much disruption and difficulty in our learning environments, and the idea of that kind of disruption after 6 weeks, along with other disruption, is really worrisome. There is some concern about schedule changes that is related to the teacher changes, about morning, afternoon, when people have been working through caregiving situations and work situations because of that. There are many parents who are appreciative about the choice and recognize that this is a desire to give parents choice over whether they feel like those who do not feel like it's safe to return, and then those who know that their students really need to have that face-to-face contact. The current plan as proposed doesn't address independent learning, which is the hardest part. And so it would be best if there could be some kind of attempt to help with that independent learning part. So the current plan, it doesn't actually increase contact time or instruction time, when the hardest part for most families is the independent learning, as far as the feedback I'm getting. The next point, that teachers must be heard. There isn't really much of an inclination out there about if they feel safe coming back, or what priorities come back, or what values they have. I think also what priorities are coming out to families is also not captured in the district survey, because whether families want to send their students back or not is not capturing how that weighs into other priorities. So say a family may actually prefer to stay with their teacher, whether they come back or not, it could be secondary to that. So a bigger conversation that takes into account different values and priorities is part of what we're asking for here. And I don't think I can speak better than I think it was Mike, but I did have some notes about the difficulty of teachers potentially teaching in 2 modes and whatnot. A lot of parents are having difficulty answering the survey that needed to be turned around in a couple of days because of unanswered questions. And I don't have time to list out all of the questions, but one of the questions that was repeated was about the status of whether Unit 4 is going to be able to get the saliva testing or not. And I know that's not in our control necessarily, but I just wanted to bring that up. So one option that had come up would be to maybe return back to the original plan of bringing back the students who are needing it the most, the students who are having trouble with access, English language learners, special education students, and taking more time to plan and have more dialogue with families and teachers, and maybe working toward a more broader opening in January. But at any point, at any rate, thank you for listening, and we look forward to dialoguing more with you.
Thank you so much, Christy. And you can email any of the comments you want, if that helps with your timing. Not last, but Dr. Zola, you're up next.
Good evening. There should be a presentation, Courtney, and Superintendent's report. Nope. It's a different report. That is later, please. Thank you. Tonight, I bring to the Board of Education some updates regarding, do we have a, sorry. The clicker? Oh, you both have one. Thank you. Resolution declaring racism as a public health crisis that the board adopted June 24th, 2020. So I wanted to bring you some updates on the work that has been occurring since your adoption. And this is not. Oh. Section 2, in August, you adopted some board policies specific to establishing structures needed for Resolution Section 8 and broader district non-discrimination goals. You might remember those as Title IX. There were some complaint and protected class policies that you adopted. Since your resolution, we created a non-discrimination commitment page on our website in August to highlight policies and reporting procedures. Tonight, the board will approve your board committee memberships. Board Policy Committee will then convene to discuss the policies outlined in the resolution. And this is separate from the broader board policy work, which will also resume the semester that you started last year prior to our COVID pause. Some internal meetings have been held developing a working document and gathering some other district policies to use as a starting point when creating our Unit 4 policies. The EEE Curriculum Advisory Ad Hoc Committee, teachers, administrators, community members met on September 24th and identified 3 priorities aligned to Section 3. They're going to review the K-12 social studies curriculum with students, with a focus on student voices, African American history, and stories of triumph. Develop equity protocols to guide program evaluation and selection of essential texts, topics, and instructional methods, and continue to share resources to support our learning. Content area chairs, building administrators, teaching and learning team met on September 4th to discuss recommendations for 650 African American history, 310 African literature, minority authors. This is a continuation of Section 3, and content area chairs will bring recommendations to the teaching and learning team on September 30th. These recommendations will be shared with the board on October 26th, Curriculum Advisory on the 28th, and EEE on October 29th. Activities around the calendar committee, recognizing Juneteenth Day. This has been added to the district's calendar, recognizing Indigenous Peoples Day. This was in the district's school year 2020 calendar previously. Our first calendar committee meeting to discuss the 22-23 calendar is scheduled for October 6th. We're currently reaching out to representative voices from various populations to ensure they received our invites and to encourage them to attend. Section 5. The district is in session on October 12th, 2020, which is Indigenous Peoples Day. This day was identified and named in the district's school year 2020-21 calendar. Teaching and Learning is working on various opportunities for individual grade levels, including the following: resources to support the celebration, and there are several, but I included a couple so that the board would, I'm happy to include these in a Friday update so that you can actually take a closer look. Section 6, district-wide training. Additional diversity awareness mandated training modules were added to our Safe Schools this year for all staff. Training was also provided to all staff regarding Title IX expectations and investigations in July and August. You'll hear some more about some additional training for administrators with VALDA. We talked a little bit about that last week with the strategic plan coming yet this year. That will also include our equity leaders at the campus level. Building specific training. Dr. Taylor is working with our school improvement leadership teams at all 19 campuses. All school improvement leadership teams will be in place by the end of this week, and they're calling them the SILT, contains 3 to 5 committees, one of which is an equity committee. The equity committee at each school has, among others, the following action steps. In consultation with district administrators, create and/or conduct mandatory diversity and inclusion, equity, and implicit bias training as directed in the Unit 4 board resolution. Recently developed school improvement plan templates required all schools that they contain among the following sections: white and black student gap analysis, comparison of each school's gap analysis to other schools in the district, SMART goals to address data from gap analysis, and an equity goal with a minimum of 2 action steps. All K-12 schools have a school improvement plan due December 1st with implementation starting in January 2021. And all building principals are required to have an equity professional growth goal with a specific focus on achievement of Black students. The outcome of this goal is directly linked to each principal's performance evaluation. And as you can see, there's a lot of overlap between the strategic planning work and obviously the resolution. 7, we're currently awaiting some federal approval to utilize some Title II funds to create a recruiting and retention specialist position that will focus on developing, implementing, and monitoring many of the items outlined in the resolution. And we're participating in several upcoming recruiting fairs, the Champaign County Housing Authority, UIU, CISU, outside some of our traditional recruiting season. The superintendent will work with the appropriate administrators to develop an annual report which will identify complaints received from various stakeholders. Training was provided to all staff regarding Title IX in July, August, and some additional training will be scheduled in the coming months. We created a non-discrimination commitment page on our website in August to highlight our policies and reporting procedures. Pending review with legal counsel, additional details surrounding complaints received between July 1 through September 30th would be reviewed with the board as appropriate. Section 9, the Discipline Advisory Committee, formerly known as the District Equity Advisory Committee, met for the first time on September 10th and reviewed preliminary ideas relative to a revised discipline system. The new model will be culturally responsive and include restorative justice approaches. Campuses will complete an assessment of their MTSS system and knowledge of restorative practices to determine training and professional development required for full implementation. And I think Mr. Thomas may speak to that this evening. Following the assessment, Dr. Taylor will work with the school improvement leadership teams at each building to develop further professional development plans. The district will partner with the Illinois Multi-Tiered System of Support for training and coaching to support campuses. The district crisis team met on September 15th to review preliminary ideas related to revised safety plan and prioritizes the goal involving the Champaign Police Department in emergent violent crisis. An updated district crisis management plan focused on district response to crisis, school messaging, and lockdowns was shared with committee members. Team members will share additional ideas to include in the plan at the next meeting scheduled for November 10th. School resource officer updates. To ensure we capture the voices of multiple stakeholders, an SRO ad hoc committee was established designed to conduct focus group discussions with students, create surveys for students, staff, parents, SROs, and administrators. The committee will also work to develop alternatives to SROs. The committee members will present a summary to the Board of Education on November 9th, 2020. Below is a summary of some ad hoc committee members and meeting dates. You'll see parents. We have 7 families represented. Safety Advisory Committee members, 2, high school administrator and a high school teacher, 4 students from Ready. Tracy Days, our partner, a dream partner from the community, Charles Burton. Discipline Advisory Committee members, 2 district administrators, a middle school teacher and a high school teacher, 4 students from Goal Getters. Our equity assistant principals from Robeson, Westview, and Bottenfield, and Reverend Comer from the community. And then these are the SRO ad hoc committee meeting dates, October 1st, 7th, 15th, 22nd, and 29th. Additional title funds will be allocated for efforts in the area, including gathering employee voice on affinity groups. The EEE committee has met twice as a team. The goal was to hold our regularly scheduled meeting, hear initial input feedback from the broader community, and establish working ad hoc groups to begin addressing our resolution. Some of the members have attended the DEAC regular committee meeting and the new EEE curriculum ad hoc meeting. As a result of our collaborative efforts, great conversations are happening. We will be providing updates to the board and the committee during our scheduled time. EEE has also added 3 additional meetings where the team will come together, share information, and give input for the update to the board. And as a group, they are excited about the collective strength that they have found in this group. We look forward to updating the board on the progress in the near future. And that is my communication regarding the district's work from the adoption of the resolution until this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Zola. And comment from board members. Elizabeth? Yes. Where'd everybody else? Oh, I can, oh, you mean up on the screen. Sorry. I'm like, they're right here. Because they're, never mind. they're here. Do either Bruce, Janina, board comment?
Sure.
Mr. Brown? Do you have a board comment?
Okay. Oh, yes. I didn't want to
Nope, you're okay. Go ahead.
interrupt anyone. Yeah, I just want to say I appreciate, the flood of community feedback and their communication to us concerning the reopening plan. I just want to just put a reminder out there that we have an entire demographic who have zero engagement through virtual learning, not counting those who are struggling, who have the support, and who are engaged. And so that demographic with zero engagement would benefit from in-person learning, even if it is limited to just 2.5 hours for the days in attendance. So for my comments is that for all parties involved, have the conversations, hammer out the protocols, communicate so we can get this done for our most marginalized students. Because the data that we saw in our last meeting, or maybe it was 2 meetings ago, for less than 10% achievement for African American students, I would hate to see that number drop even more because we don't have anything in place for our students who do not benefit from virtual learning. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. Heather?
There are so many moving pieces of this week for all of us. I'm so grateful for the community comments. One of the reasons last year I voted against having meetings on Tuesdays was we would come up, one of the reasons was we come up against city council and the navigation that the team had to make today, our community members, our partners, the people who are listening at home, trying to navigate how we watch this is one of the reasons I have other reasons I don't want Tuesday meetings, but this is one of the reasons, and I think we need to continue to try to find resolutions that don't put us in conflict with our colleagues over in City Council, particularly when we have so many people actively participating in the process, waiting their turn to be active participants in the work we get to do for this community. So I'm hoping that we can continue to explore that. Susan just mentioned calendar and calendar planning, so we'll be paying attention to that, but that was one of the reasons I personally voted last year that I didn't love this calendar, and I'm appreciative a little bit more today as to why, because we're all trying to do our very level best to get to all the places we have to get to today. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Heather. Elizabeth?
Good evening. Am I on? How about now? Am I on? Okay. Good evening, Board of Education, Dr. Zola, Assistant Superintendents, and the Champaign community. All Black Lives Matter, Native Lives Matter, and budgets are moral documents. These past few weeks have been difficult for everyone. Families are really struggling right now. COVID, racial injustice, and the absolute lack of empowering leadership at the national level in our country is weighing heavily on all of us. I acknowledge that some in our community, namely our neighbors of color, are bearing this load much more than the rest of us. This evening, I have a few questions, and I will, as Mike Sitch said when he wrote his comments, he had different information that he was working with. I recognize that I now have some updated information, so I'll try to update my comments from where they were. On June 24th, we passed an anti-racism resolution tasking multiple committees with bringing recommendations to the board. Tonight, we are seeing recommendations from just one committee, the DAC committee. While the board has received a schedule when we'll receive reports and administrative work tied to our resolution, this is separate from receiving recommendations. Every day that our district doesn't have a clear set of policies and procedures, which are guided by these recommendations we are to receive, our students and families are still served with injustice. I do thank Dr. Zola for providing those updates to see exactly where the district is. This is heartening, but I stand by what I said. We've got to see these recommendations. The second question I have is, what is our district's policy around collections and drives? It's come to my attention that in the past few weeks, several local organizations have run their own book drives and school supply drives. Some organizations are collecting used books with diverse characters and stories. Other organizations have made a book list that directs people to buy and donate brand new copies of specific titles. I've also seen some school supply drives for specific schools. Our national narrative about race, racism, and white supremacy has thankfully come to the forefront these past few months. This narrative has been part of the daily lives and experiences of our Black, Brown, and Indigenous community members, and has gone largely ignored by white people forever. I'm very grateful that talking about racism and oppressive systems has become mainstream. It's caused many of us, especially us white folks, to want to do something. But unfortunately, we're repeating the very things that maintain and protect the status quo. My question is, who coordinated and gave permission for these drives? How were the needs determined? Who determined those needs? Who was asked to participate? Who was expected to receive? Were those voices asked what they need? And most astonishingly, who said the district doesn't have the funding to pay for these books and items ourselves? These types of drives and fundraisers are, by definition, inequitable. They're getting resources only to some schools, only to some students, with no clear plan of how these resources will be equitably distributed to where they need to go. When Dr. Baker and I co-authored the anti-racism resolution, fundraisers were not at all what we envisioned. We envisioned creating a culture of anti-racism, creating schools that are places of liberation for our students. When the board passed the resolution unanimously, all 7 of us co-signed on investing the time, money, and resources needed to deliver racial and education justice in our schools. Budgets are moral documents. Board members have been in discussions with Linda Matkowski about our budget and how it aligns with our resolution since July. We've been listening to her presentations about the budget, and we'll hear more about it this evening. This resolution isn't just a bunch of words and a smile. It is a declaration of justice, a promise to all of our students and our families that the board demands our district reorganize every bit of itself to serve our students with justice. Did the district need these drives to get white-centric books on our library shelves? How well have fundraisers worked so far to advance equity and justice in our schools? Why are we still leaning on these fundraisers and drives? I know these are hard words to hear, and they're not directed at any individual. It's directed at all of us as a community, myself included. I acknowledge that I myself have unquestionably participated in book drives, supply drives, and fundraisers. And in very specific cases, these initiatives can be great ways to expand our literature and media offerings to our students and families. But if these initiatives aren't tied to curriculum and a plan, we're simply throwing more resources that are disconnected from relationships, teaching, mentoring, and love at our students who need far more of the latter than the former. If we've not first asked our teachers and librarians, I want to help, anonymously. My family values anti-racism and we want to be a part of the solution, not the problem. How can we do that? What do you need from us? Donating to these drives can absolve the guilt and shame many of us feel. Perhaps, in actuality, many of us need to sit longer with those uncomfortable feelings. Discomfort is the beginning of change, and change is needed so desperately in our community and our nation right now. Finally, Dr. Zola and my board colleagues, we need to talk about committees. And I'm very excited to see a lot of the progress that's been made by the committees by the work that was presented this evening. We have lots of committees, and I mentioned them in my first point. I guess more specifically, we need to talk about who is participating in our conversations about how to steer this district towards racial and education justice. Our committees are designed for people who have the time and transportation to get to our committee meetings. They're designed for people who know how to apply, they know where to go, they know how the process works. You need some inside knowledge, it seems like, to know how to do that. They're tailored beautifully for concerned parents who have access to childcare and whose work schedule allows them to make these late afternoon committee meetings. They're excellent opportunities for folks who are retired, who don't have young kids at home, and folks who want to give back. I'm grateful to people who've been on our committees. But I'm asking us to reconsider how we choose the community members who will serve on committees. We are hearing a lot from adults who are speaking on behalf of each other and our students. This introduces othering language, where we really should be trying to figure out how to let people speak for themselves. If our committee structure poses barriers to true involvement from our most impacted community residents, then let's come up with new equitable structures. When I look at our committees, I don't see much diversity at all. Where are our neighbors who immigrated here from Guatemala, Mexico, Ecuador, Honduras, Iraq, Afghanistan, Laos, Cambodia? Where are our bilingual neighbors? Where are our LGBTQIA families? Where are our single parents who work several jobs to put food on the table? Where are our grandmas who are raising their grandkids? Where are our neighbors with disabilities? Why are so many of our neighbors shut out from these opportunities to help us bring these recommendations forward? Have we created echo chambers where we've fallen into believing that we're the only experts locally? Have we fallen into the trap of believing that people who aren't in these spaces need us to speak for them? Have we allowed ourselves to expand into spaces that really ought to be guarded and reserved for folks to take up when we've removed barriers to their participation? I want to learn how we can make our committees, be they existing or brand new, majority student, if at all possible. After all, aren't we here to create the best schools possible for our students? Aren't they the ones who stand the most to gain or lose based on the decisions that we adults make? Aren't students their own experts of their own lives? And don't we want to teach them how to advocate for themselves and others? We've already acknowledged that we have a serious problem with inequity in our community, especially racial and economic inequity. But the people we keep inviting into this work are typically not the people who can use their own voices and to speak to their own experiences about how their families have struggled because of the injustices in our district. I hope that Dr. Zola and the board will agree to look into a restructuring of our committees so that our district can truly make our schools places of liberation. If that requires updating board policy or perhaps an additional resolution, then let's do it. And if you're out there listening, if you see that your life experiences aren't reflected in our committees, and if you've got ideas for how we can make that better, email the board, u4boe@u4sd.org. You can also find it on the website. If you see your identity and experiences already reflected, perhaps in the majority of the decision-making spaces of our district, we need you too. Perhaps not in these non-diverse spaces just yet, but as part of the community's solution to understanding and dismantling barriers that exclude so many of our neighbors from our schools. All Black Lives Matter, Native Lives Matter, budgets are moral documents. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Dr. Baker?
I just have a couple of questions toward Dr. Zola's report. One, for the Safe Schools, who added the training, the diversity training? Was that Safe Schools itself, or was that something that the district has some control over?
It's part of the existing Safe Schools modules, but we chose to add it specifically.
Okay, thank you. And one comment perhaps toward the legislative committee that we'll speak to later. I know that there are other districts, namely one, Decatur, that is trying to push on Indigenous Peoples Day to be recognized at the state level. And so potentially that is something that they can do. They've already tried to contact their reps and have gotten little progress, but perhaps that is something as we move forward that we're interested in. And the only other thing I say, I only have one question. I'll leave the rest for a few later. The only other thing I'll say is I'm okay with emailing the board, but can you send solutions? I've heard a lot of complaints. I've heard a lot of why this can't work. I haven't heard the why it can't work. And so I invite you to listen to Dr. Zola's report later and email us with solutions. So thanks, that's it.
Thank you, Dr. Baker. And I think just to echo Dr. Baker's note about our legislative committee, that also impacts our community because nothing changes until school code changes in Springfield. And that's where a lot of our energy from our community needs to be directed as well, to changing school code and how that's written. The fact that you have to call it code tells me you can't read it. So we need to be contacting our legislators who represent us at the state level. That's where it has to come from. It has to start there, and our voices matter there. So our legislative committee, we'll talk about that later, but that's an important piece when we talk about how things filter back down to a local level. Thank you, everyone, for your comments. That will move us into 5, which is a public hearing on our budget. This is a public hearing for fiscal year 2021 budget. Linda, do you want me to open the public hearing now, or do you want to wait? Okay. I need a motion to open the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Soteropoulos Vasquez. Tammy, please call roll.
Ms. Soteropoulos?
Yes.
Ms. Vasquez?
Yes.
Ms. Armstrong?
Yes.
Dr. Baker?
Yes.
Mr. Brown? Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Now we'll turn this over to you, Ms. Matowski.
All right, so this is the public hearing. We're going to do this, basically that'll be the public hearing and also help the board for information at the next step of this, which is to actually adopt the budget. As a sort of quick outset, couple things as we walk through this, I'll highlight, including some changes with respect to things we've added from a revenue, some of which are COVID, some of which are definitely related to the resolutions, that the board's aware of where it's sitting. And then go through to the previous conversation about legislation, where we're going to see some drops in revenue because that has some legislative aspects to it. And then talk a little bit about overall profit loss changes. And as a reminder, to help encourage public participation with respect to the Finance Committee, which I know is really boring, we have moved the meetings to monthly so that board and community members can participate more frequently in conversations around the finances of the district, what we're doing, pick on very specific topics that they might be interested in. For example, one of the things I know we've got on the agenda coming up is to talk more specifically about expenditures in buildings, so that people have a real understanding of sort of where the budget is at, where those expenditures are happening, and what sorts of things are happening with those expenditures. And then retying it back into performance and student performance related issues. Budget assumptions this year. In general, the operating fund revenues are up about 6.25%. We did use some conservative revenue assumptions when we built the budget this time, including reducing a number of the lines to account for COVID, specifically things that were more sensitive to attendance, student textbook fees, lunch fees, things where no students being in buildings would probably with affect the revenue stream as it relates to participation. The other pieces, we did bring down local property taxes a little bit. Generally speaking, property taxes in and of themselves are really stable here. There really isn't a threat, even with COVID, that we're going to have a situation where people aren't going to pay their property taxes. What we are finding is we are still experiencing a delay in property tax receipts. This is going to come up when we talk about fund balances. We had a conversation with the auditors last week, and we will be making some adjustments to property tax accruals. Corporate personal property tax, we already know that's down, and that is largely related to COVID. That's a state revenue source, so when that comes into us, it's mostly commercial businesses, so it goes hand in hand with their ability to maintain open-close situations. School sales, or the school facility sales tax, we've budgeted a reduction, about a little over $1 million. Sales tax receipts for the county are running at 30%, below what we would have expected them to do, and they've been very consistent. So we're going to continue to hold at that number for the time being. A reminder, that money actually is what is used to pay debt service on some existing bonds, as well as what will help pay for new construction over the next couple of years. And then on an ongoing basis, that money will be used to pay for ongoing maintenance and improvements at the various buildings. State aid, EBF funding is flat this year. Other grants are flat. The state's agreed to hold everything. However, this is unbelievably tied to the governor's ability to pass the Fair Tax Amendment. He has been very, very public in his statements all the way through. In fact, the lieutenant governor last week sort of went a little further out on her skis than she probably should have with a couple of statements. everything points to the fact that State Board will have to reduce what they distribute if in fact the budget doesn't have the benefit of the fair tax having been passed. We already know transportation aid is down next year. That is a reflection of COVID. It's really tied to the numbers of miles that buses travel. Federal grants, same thing. We did have the additional 2.4 in the CARES money built into the budget this year. The expenditures, this is where this gets tricky. The general operating expenditure numbers are up about 10%. That is highly connected to COVID, to going to remote, to some of the things that we're doing. So we'll talk more specifically about that. Overall salaries and benefits have increased about $4.4 million. Combined funds, there's increases in purchase services of 33.5. This is mostly due to capital projects. Supplies and materials have increased about $4.5 million, mostly due to increases in Ed O&M transportation funds that are relative to the new COVID expenditures we've experienced. Education fund, for those of you that were connected with the referendum, the education fund has continued to have some capital outlays, mostly due to the expenditure in the food service equipment that is going into the new construction spaces. It's a technical aspect of law, but we can't actually transfer food service money out of the education fund over to the capital projects fund. So we have to expend it out of the ed fund. But what we're going to do is we're going to transfer $14 million instead of $15 million. So we'll talk about that this year to make that balance work. We've got another $1.1 million in increases built in for internet and software infrastructure related to distance learning, and another $700,000 in non-cap expenses related in the ed fund to Chromebook purchases, iPads. This is the debt service leases that are associated with acquiring all of that computer technology. That will allow us to get to one-to-one computing. As we mentioned in the Finance Committee last week, what that means, though, is in future budgets, we'll have to continue to budget for that ongoing expense. So this will be a new ongoing expense with respect to the replacement repair over time. The restricted capital project fund will continue to be spent down. That's a function of the referendum. Increases in fiscal 21 are estimates based on the assumptions having to do with COVID and really largely associated with one-time expenses. So we are going to overspend probably about $2.5 million when all is said and done on a budget basis, given what we know now. So, and I hesitate to say that because this has been moving as we go throughout the course of the year. On a budget our size, really not a huge deficit, and we've really reallocated where some of this money is going to. Part of what is sitting in the expenses this year, there is an absolute line item for $1 million that's been identified for equity. $200,000 of it has already been used for salaries associated with assistant principals at elementary schools, leaving $800,000 of dedicated equity dollars apart from everything else so that equity work can continue. So that is additional money on top of everything else that the board and the administration can use to develop, direct, expend towards equity activity as it goes forward through the course of the year. We have $1 million we built into the budget we just talked about with respect to technology needs. This is an increase over previous years, so this is an additional $1 million. We have an additional $750,000 we've built into the budget for curriculum adoptions. So that includes needs that they may have as they go through the year, both in hard textbook, hard workbooks, as well as software licenses, things like that, as they walk through that process. There's an additional $380,000 that was built into the nursing area, specifically for nursing and safety pieces. And there is an additional $75,000 that we put into the O&M budget, specifically for just cleaning supplies, literally the liquid cleaning supplies. That doesn't include any of the other activity that has to go into cleaning those buildings. With respect to the budget, just quickly as we walk through this, on the revenue sources, again, 78% of the dollars are coming from local property tax resources. That's about 130 million. 16 million is coming from the Fed and 19 million is coming from the state. And then the breakout of where the direct revenues are going to, you can see education, appropriately so, is the largest fund that the district runs. Of that 121 million, 70% of that is local revenue. That's property taxes that are coming in. The board has seen this before. It's a comparable with respect to 17, 18, 19, where we have got pre-audit numbers for fiscal 20 and the proposed budget for 21. You can see the changes. The top line is all revenue sources. The subtotal at the bottom line is actually operating revenue. Operating accounts are ed, O&M, transportation, working cash. So the combination of those is what we often refer to as our operating accounts, because those are the funds with the most flexibility. So as you can see in the operating accounts, we're budgeting for revenues of about 136 million. This represents about 6.25 more from last year. Non-operating revenue is really things that are a little more specific, not easily transferred: debt service, capital projects, muni retirement, tort, and health life safety. On the direct expenditure side, we're spending about 124 million in the ed fund. Of that 124, 100 million of it, or 80%, is related to salaries and benefits. And then again, sort of a historical look at the operating expenditures, 17, 18, 19, 20 pre-audit, and 21. This does represent an increase of about 10% in the operating funds. And you can see within those main funds sort of the sub-function totals between instruction, support services. So instruction is direct instruction. That 1,000 line, that represents direct instruction that's happening in a classroom. Support services are all of the things that start wrapping around students. So think library, nursing, the superintendent's office, the board. So as you sort of think about it like an onion, instruction is the core, support services start wrapping around it. Community services wrap around that. So those are the activities that are happening that allow the district to establish relationships or participate in things that are happening within a community. And then 2 other districts, those are transfers that are happening to other districts. Typically that is almost exclusively special ed, because those are services that are going tuition. Debt service contingency. I included the transfers in and out so that people could see money that was coming into the fund and going out of the fund on a below the line basis. So again, you can see ed fund, operations, transportation, and working cash. And then again, on the non-operating accounts, debt service, capital projects, muni retirement, tort, and then fire prevention, safety. So those funds have discrete purposes. Typically, you're not transferring money in and out of those funds. There's also historical review on the revenues and expenditures that are by object. So this is all of the district all at one time. So salaries, benefits, purchase services, supplies and materials, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. So you can get a sense of the growth of some of these expenditure lines. So in total, the district's salaries and benefits have grown from about 91 million to well over 100 million over that course of time. So you can see the percentages. This year, the increase year to year is about 4.2%. Then you walk down, purchase services are a set of activities where we either, we literally purchase the service, right? So if you're thinking about it, so our software licenses, contracts that we enter into, leases, things like that. Supplies and materials are the crayons, the paper, the the pencils, the books, the Chromebooks, the laptop types of activities, things where we actually have to purchase a supply. Capital outlay are bigger expenditures. The other expenditures include there's a variety of things that are in there which we can go into, but the largest portion of that are things that are related to debt service, things like that have to happen. Non-cap equipment, we really don't do any of that, and then we have no termination benefits. So in general, in total, the district's budget across all funds has increased about 15%. Fund balance review. Items to note, the overall fund balance decrease, which you'll see on this next page, is mainly comprised of a transfer between the Ed Fund and the Capital Projects Fund. This is to partially fulfill the district's obligation under the referendum publicly, where they stated they were moving $25 million over. If you recall, we said we were going to split that across 2 fiscal cycles in order, one, to be able to better match up to what the need was in the Capital Projects Fund, but also to ensure that we had enough cash flow as we're going through this period with COVID. Additional decreases in the fund balances are largely related to some unknown factors around COVID. We did do some conservative budgeting on the revenue side. We also went the other direction and did conservative budgeting, meaning we put more into the budget with respect to the expenditure side, so we are going to have a deficit. The fiscal 21 budget is going to be amended. My sense is we're going to amend it in December and January, because we'll have another quarter's worth of information. We'll be past the election. We'll be able to update, and then we'll update again as we get into June. The district historically has done those budget amendments as we get into the June period. So here's a look at the fund balance information. This is as of September 25th. We have not received property taxes since July. So we are living on our cash balances. So we are hoping that we will start to see some property tax receipts and distributions coming in fairly soon. But this gives you a sense of the district's fund balances, relatively steady. Really, the only major change that's happening is the big transfer out of Ed over into the Capital Projects Fund. So you can see that that was expected. And then at the bottom, for those that are interested in the ratio piece of it, the operating accounts, as you look at the Ed O&M transportation working cash funds, you can see revenue expenditure fund balance, and then the fund balance to expenditure ratio, average days on cash, average daily expenditure rates, and then fund balance to revenue ratios. So those are the ratios that a lot of times they'll look at when they're doing financial profile scores, when Moody's or S&P are doing rating reports. So the district is still holding. This is exactly in line with what the board had thought was going to happen when they did the transfers. This shouldn't be a big surprise that that particular fund balance situation was going to occur.
Linda, can you address how much you would have expected to receive at this point that we still haven't received?
We are 30 million-ish short, probably somewhere in that vicinity. So, and they are supposed to be working on it, and we are supposed to be seeing something at the end of the month, which is tomorrow. So we're hopeful. I presented out, or I know over the weekend, additional information was sent to the board. That's deeper dive material. It's also posted on Board Docs, so it's available for folks to look at, which is more historical in nature and really starts to break out detail and information with respect to funds and what's happening. In future meetings, we're about ready to start into the levy process, so the levy process will pick up probably in the next 2 meetings or 3 meetings. The Finance Committee will also have some aspect with respect to understanding the levy and where we're setting it, so that'll be their opportunity to kind of weigh in and give guidance. Property tax levies pretty much are what they are because of the statutes around them, so it's not like there's a lot of big changing. But this is also going to happen at the backdrop. We are presenting or submitting our information this year with respect to some preliminary planning around how we're spending state money. That is going to be a deeper dive conversation for everybody because that's the period where we start getting very specific about what is actually being done with the revenue we're receiving from state and federal government. sources. So those are the next steps. We've sort of gone through those very quickly. And that's the end of the presentation.
Thank you, Linda. This is a public hearing. We welcome to questions from the audience. Any questions from the audience regarding the budget as presented? Okay. Board questions? Heather?
I have two questions. I've seen on social media some indications that people are getting fees assigned for late revenue collection of for their property taxes. So people, I've been following along. There's some narrative in the News Gazette suggesting that there's been some fees assigned for people, to individuals, to households.
Correct. Correct.
Who keeps those fees for something that we now are late on? We're getting late. Just curious.
I would assume that the county keeps the fees.
Seems like a reasonable time to suggest that tomorrow is the last day of September.
Yes.
Earlier on page 4, you talked about, in the presentation, you talked about financial planning for some things that were coming, that additional healthcare, nurses, et cetera. Are we at all budgeting for potentially helping offset costs related to saliva testing at some point into the future? Is that part of this? Will that become part of our budgetary process?
It will become a part of the budgetary process. I think we need to talk about, based off what the university's been signaling as a cost, and then the comfort of everyone with the expense that's going to be associated with that. I think Dr. Zola has part of that for her presentation coming up, because it would definitely have to be budgeted.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Elizabeth?
Sorry.
It's okay.
Okay, so I have excuse me, a really specific question and then just a general question. So my specific question is, on one of the slides it said there's a 4.22% increase for salaries. And I believe that number looks really familiar for administrative raises. I know that I believe I saw an email from the community earlier today that said something about can teacher raises be same as administrative raises, and that's part of the teacher contract. So I guess now I have two questions. The 4.22% increase in salary district-wide, does that include everybody, administrators, teachers, CESP?
It includes everybody.
Okay.
And
do you?
so
Yeah.
teachers have anybody in a bargaining unit has a very specific contract. The majority of the staff here are under bargaining contracts. So their bargaining contracts exceed that 4% for some of those units.
Okay.
So the costs are largely driven by where you would expect them to be driven for a school district, right? Basically it's your teachers and classroom staff. So that's where that 4.2 is coming from.
Great.
Could we have Ken just clarify? I know administrators were 2.25.
Yeah, that's correct. So administrators were lower, some support staff, and as Linda indicated, depending on where they would be on the salary schedule, there are some support staff who would be higher than the 4.2. There are several teachers who would be higher than the 4.2 average, and so it's off. But there are also some people, fewer of them, because of the way the employees are scattered on the scattergram, is what we call it. That would be lower than that, and so the average that she's giving is the 4.2, which would take into account everyone, and that also would include, your hourly non-bargaining staff. Some of them were below the 4, some of them would have been above the 4, so it's a compilation of everyone.
Okay. Thank you. And then I have a broader question, and this is something that you and I talked about this past summer, but I think it would be really helpful for the community to hear. Going back to what I talked about earlier in my board comment, if let's say the district, a school in our district is saying, okay, we've got this resolution, we've been tasked with coming up with a new curriculum, we need to change the books we have, we need to change the materials we have, we need to change the posters that are hanging up. How does that process work? How would a school, whether it's a teacher or place in the school, support services, how do they update, or how do they get funding from the district for those needs?
So I can't speak to what has happened, but I can speak to what we've been trying to put into place. So this is going to be a process because this district hadn't budgeted exactly like this. So the budget in and of itself at the building level was based on the students that were attending that particular site. So as their population and demographic was changing, they were either getting a little more or a little less, right? So that's sort of the base of the building. But layered on top of that are a whole lot of other spaces. So let's say that the group of second graders or third graders came in and said, we need to get new textbooks. We don't like this textbook, right? So a district doesn't do textbook adoptions in isolation of a building, right? So you're not going to have a building that's going to have something different than somebody else is going to have. So those teachers are coming together through particular cycles and groups and meetings. And then that information starts flowing to the various administrators. And when we sit down and say, what do you actually need in your budget? That's when they come back in and say, hey, we know that these things are coming. So that's part of the reason there's another $750,000 that's sitting in the adoption cycle groups this time, because as Mike Blair's come through, he said, hey, I've identified this and this and this. This is what staff is telling me. This is what building administrators are telling me. And they sort of raise that up through the budget process. What we also need to do on the other side of that is, I think, where you want to go to, and I've heard some other board members want to get to, which is, how do I drill all that way back down to that individual student in that particular classroom in that seat, right? So that's a bring it up, bring it back down process. The state and the federal government are helping quite a bit, because they're now requiring, if you get money from them, you have to show, you've got to sort of what your local base level is, and then you start adding in, well, what are you getting in special ed that's on top of that? What are you doing on top of that? What are you doing on top for low-income students? What are you doing for EL students? And you're going to have to start really specifically showing that you're not just pulling money out of your regular pot to push it someplace else, but that you are actually specifically providing those revenue sources to expenditures for those particular students, and then they're tying it to outcomes. So if you're telling me you're spending all this money on a special ed student that's in a low-income population group as well, you sure as the heck better have the performance information side by side. And that's what they're trying to push. So to do that, we're going to have to adjust the budget process. So the budget process is going to be a 12-month process, and it's really going to have to be tied into performance, right? So if somebody comes in and says, we want this much money, then the response has to be, if I have a little bit more, a little bit less, right? What are you going to do with it? But more importantly, at the end of the day, if you got this, how do you tie it back to performance objectives, to goals and objectives for the board? How does it tie? How does everything start tying back into the strategic plan? So this process is going to be a new one for a lot of the administrators that are walking through it. It'll be a good process for them because it's very business-like. This is what you do in business. And I think it'll help the board and the community feel better about understanding sort of the money process starting up from a needs perspective, and then the responsibility from a performance perspective coming back down.
Thank you. And as one more question, how would you suggest to people in our community right now that are just sitting on a pile of money, and they're like, I don't know what to do with this, but I want to help our schools. How does that, it's everybody, right? No, it's not. How would that look? What would you say to someone who wants to, help our schools, but we want to do it equitably?
So you raised good points, and I think what needs to be done is we need to sit back down and figure out what's the right way to do that, right? It's not always common to have the ability to have community members that are doing this sort of providing constantly, and we are really fortunate. We have a lot of people who've provided very generously.
Yeah.
part of what we need to do is figure out a really good way to do the allocation process so that it is appropriate. And that's partly policy, that's partly conversation around how to do it with building administrators and how to make that process work so that building administrators aren't buried with 600 new pages of things, and people in the community feel like if they are wanting to provide or they are wanting to give, they're doing it in a good space. So I think that's a more to come. And I don't want to let it go, but we just don't have it right now.
So, thank you very much.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Bruce, Janina, any questions? Nope.
I'll ask the questions I ask at the referendum oversight, just so that it's
On record.
have we heard if we receive any more CARES money?
We received $160,000 more in CARES pending what happened with the court case. So that releases a portion of the money that would have been directed to private schools. That released it back to us.
And do we anticipate a number of retirements this coming year?
That is a question I don't have off the top of my head. Do you, I don't know,
So I anticipate a usual number. I don't anticipate an unusual number. And I think just looking at some of the things TRS has put out, they actually have not seen, at least the last time I looked, they have not seen an increase in retirements relative to some of the stories that are going on in the national media that has not had the impact in Illinois. I have not had conversations that give me reason to believe there would be more of that beyond the usual.
Linda, can you clarify that there was a private school allocation? Because we did give our private schools allocations as a part of the CARES money.
Yeah, so there was a private school allocation that was roughly 300, 400,000, but part of that was in contest with the Department of Ed, because remember the Department of Ed's reading of the original act was that should be that states were going to get that money based on their free and reduced lunch count, but not necessarily should think of that as free and reduced lunch money, count money, that actually just had to be allocated by the numbers of students within each district. So they were expecting that private schools would get a pro rata share based on head count. Many places, many states sued, came back into the Department of Ed and said, unfair, this was really the intent was to provide to the neediest in a community, and we need to rethink the allocation process. The Department of Ed put their foot down. They declared rules. Everybody went to court, and within the last 2 weeks, those court cases have started to be settled. And what's been happening, I guess, is a capitulation on the part of Department of Ed that, okay, you only have to do this for students that count as free and reduced, which dramatically reduces the amount of money that's eligible out to private schools, because that isn't necessarily a population that they're specifically serving. So it stands to reason that number would have come down and we would receive that money back in. So that's what that 160 is. Does that answer? Yeah.
My last question, looking at the total amount for this year, does it cost more for students to not be in school? I'm just looking at
it is costing more for students. It is costing more for students regardless of where they sit. Maybe that's a better way to say it. It would cost more if they were in school. It would cost more if they were not in school, just simply because the cost of everything is continuing to go up.
Thank you, Dr. Baker. I think the only question I have is back to the line of the in-outs, especially around the SPED. That was such a giant jump.
It's not all on non-district tuition.
Yeah.
So that's not all. It's that 600,000.
Okay.
Yeah. That's all outplacement.
Okay.
And for a lot of districts, that's a really difficult number because it's very situational.
Right.
And so some years it's high, some years it's low, and it's just very dependent upon what the need is that's being served.
So I have comments found out later with your presentation, Dr. Zola. So I'd like do I have to take a motion to close the hearing? I have a motion to close the hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Soteropoulos Vasquez. Tammy, would you please call roll?
Ms. Soteropoulos,
Yes.
Ms. Vasquez,
Yes.
Ms. Armstrong,
Yes.
Dr. Baker,
Yes.
Mr. Brown.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0. The public hearing is closed. Thank you so much for that presentation, Linda. And could you send our thanks to Michelle and Seth and Sherry, everybody in your office that I know really supports a lot of this work and these numbers, and we appreciate that so much. That will move us to agenda item 6. These are all reports, new business. Item A is the superintendent search update. And as a part of the superintendent selection process, Dr. Zola is retiring. The Board of Education approved executive search services offered by Ray & Associates. And Miss Gloria Davis has been sitting here with us this evening very patiently. Thank you so much. And you will provide an update to the board regarding the search for a new superintendent. So I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, President Armstrong, and sitting, just listening, it brings back memories, especially the budget report as a retired superintendent. I would like to begin by first and foremost saying that as a part of this process, I was here in Champaign for 2 days and completed an entire series of stakeholder meetings, met with about 12 groups, over 150 individuals. And I would just like to say to the entire community, thank you for your participation. Thank you for your tenacity in completing the survey that was online and your written comments. It is just very heartwarming to see the way that the community and the staff has been engaged in this process. So I want to just begin by just saying thank you to everyone. And with that, as I stated when I met with the various groups, that I would be giving a summary report to the board and to the public, primarily based on the stakeholder meetings that were held, but also folding in the survey comments and the results of the surveys that everyone completed online. With that, I would like to say to the board, I would like to refer you to the single sheet that is indicated topics for a discussion, and we'll just go through that list. This is just kind of like a slight agenda that will keep us on task as we move forward. And the first item on that agenda is just giving the board an overview of the themes, a summary of the ideas and concepts that were heard in the personal sessions that I held, that were held throughout the 2 days that I was here, as well as the community meetings that were held when I was also here. And I do understand that we will have another community meeting coming up on, I believe, October 20th at 6:30. Amy, 6:30, I think, at one of the schools, and communication, I know, has gone out about that, or if not, the continual communication will be out about that, as well as having a meeting in person with social distancing, but we will also, parents and community members and staff will also have the ability to meet with us through a Zoom connection. So October 20th, mark your calendars at 6 p.m. We're going to continue just to hear from community members, and especially those community members that may not feel that they're always heard. One of the tenets of what we do within the search process is just to make sure that all voices are heard. With that, I would like to refer the board to the document that is indicated with the heading Stakeholders Meeting Summary Report. It's a 4-page document because my comments at this time will come from that document. And again, this is just a summary of what I found and heard as I listened to the many participants. As I said, there were about 12 groups, all total over 150 individuals who were very open and honest with their comments and their conversation. I will definitely say no one is shy about saying how they feel. And that was a good thing. I encouraged them to do so. So people were very ready to let me know how they feel. And the process involved having a series of questions that each group was asked, the same questions for each group, and then their responses were recorded, as well as I took copious notes during each one of the sessions. And one of the first questions that I asked is, what were the significant strengths of the school district? And I am very pleased to say that many individuals talked about the pride they have and the partnership that the district enjoys with community groups, especially the universities and the hospitals and the other community leaders such as city government and some of the larger businesses, especially hospitals, healthcare, and just felt that the district was doing a great job in that area. It was also discussed that the overall diversity of the district is a source of pride for everyone, and the fact that the student population is primarily comprised of Black, African American students, white, indigenous students, people from families from all countries around the globe. It was just really nice to hear that people felt good about that, and that was one of the reasons they even moved here, because it felt like an international community. So there was a lot of conversation around that. There was conversation around the fact that special education students and their families feel very included, and that there are many programs to help the children prosper and grow and have continual success. And we'll talk more about some of the challenges that come along with that in a minute, but people felt very good about that. They also mentioned, and we just heard a budget report, but they felt very good about the financial stability of the district and the fact that the district is continuing to grow financially, and given when the state sends money and when they don't, I do remember that, Linda. But still, that the budget, the overall budget is in good shape, and as part of a compliment with that is the fact that that is one of the reasons why people voted for the referendum. So another source of pride are the facilities, and the fact that the community feels that the schools are improving and that the money that has been allocated from the referendum is something that they felt very good about. There was a lot of pride and compliments for our teachers and building level administrators, basically stating that they feel a lot of them care about students and they focus on the whole child. So it's not just focusing on the academic part of the students' growth and ability, but also other areas, social, emotional growth and trauma, and really dealing with issues that students bring to the classroom that need extensive care beyond just what they learn in the textbook. So there were many families that felt pretty good about that. Finally, parents and individuals were very concerned and talked about how that the students feel, especially at the high school, that teachers reach out to them even after they graduate. Some of your former students talked about how teachers just check in with them and ask how they're doing and are they successful? Do they need additional help and support? So the students were very proud of that. That was a really great group of young people that I talked to. They said, "Ms. Davis, you need to come see us." I'm like, okay. In terms of the community itself, one of the other questions that I ask is, what are the positives regarding the community? Meaning, why should a new superintendent pick up his or her family and move to Champaign? And again, the idea of the diversity of the community and the population was a definite plus, and people felt very good about that. One of the comments that was made, big city feel in a small town. So you have diversity of families, diversity of culture, but at the same time, everyone can feel that small town atmosphere in terms of everyone knowing everyone, or at least trying to get to know others, and just feeling that you're not in a large city. In fact, the conversation was around, Ms. Davis, you can get anywhere in 10 minutes from one end of the town to another. Being from Chicago, I said, okay, I do appreciate that. And remember that from being the superintendent in Decatur. There was also mention that the city itself is in a geographic location that makes it very accessible to go to St. Louis, Chicago, or Indiana in terms of being able to have access to even a larger community. So people felt very good about that. They basically said it was a good place to raise a family and a good place to have your kids involved in other community activities, youth programs, access to the park in lieu of COVID or before COVID-19, and also affordable housing, that you can have a nice place to live and not have to pay an extensive amount of money as you would in a much larger city. So overall, lots of positive comments about the district and the community of Champaign. And then I continue to ask then, what are some of the critical issues that the new superintendent will face? And to a group and a person, it was discussed that the systemic racism that has prevailed itself within the district and within the Champaign community, depending on where you live and where you worship and where you shop, is a critical issue that the new superintendent will face. It was stated time and again that there is great appreciation for the fact that the district has developed an anti-racism resolution, and one of the issues that was mentioned over and over again is to make sure that that resolution is implemented with tenacity, that is implemented with care in terms of involving all of the individuals across the community that need to be involved, that it addresses the systemic causes, and that it is looking at the root causes of why the systemic racism exists. It was mentioned that while people understand that you can have a resolution and you can have committees, but what they did not want to see is more of the same, that they want to have the district to move forward in such a way that it is a sea change. It is a change that has not happened before, and people are willing to help. They're willing to give support to the effort, but they were very emphatic that what they would like to see is issues addressed that people feel very strongly about, especially as it relates to their children. For example, it was mentioned in the special needs group that Black special needs parents feel like they're treated differently, and that there's something that if they need, that they don't always get without going through a lot of hoops to achieve it. And there was a very passionate conversation around that. The other area that was addressed as a critical need is the area of trust, and wanting to really understand, wanting the new superintendent to understand that there's a feeling of a lack of trust between various groups and various entities within the district, and it then has has developed into silos, and that people feel that they need to go their own way to get something done, rather than having a progressive process that helps the things that need to happen. And I want to be clear that as they were speaking of these issues, it always came back to, but we're willing to do what we can to assist in this. So it wasn't that the concerns were mentioned and then everyone just wanted to step back and not roll up their sleeves and help. So it was a combination of the thoughts were there, and even from the students. One of the students talked about how in one of their AP classes that an African-American young man was made to feel by the comments that were made, and I'm just going to say by the teacher, that he shouldn't be in the class. And after 2 weeks, he dropped out of the class. And the students felt that that should not have happened. So it's a matter of, from the community standpoint, from the parent standpoint, from the staff standpoint, the issue of systemic racism and how people are feeling and feel like they're treated is something that will definitely need to be addressed. And the superintendent was given a report this evening, and I think that helps to move that whole conversation forward. There's a sense of urgency that people want to make sure that is sounded and that is stated and that is felt. As several people say, they do not want another task force, another committee, another report. They want action. They want things to change. And they want to make sure that that is understood and a critical part of the resolution. With that, as a part of the conversation, when I asked, well, what does that look like, or how do you want that to be addressed, a couple of examples were mentioned, and one of the big ones was the school of choice, that the school of choice concept was a good concept when it was instituted, but that the original intent of the program is not being actualized, or people felt like it wasn't being actualized, and that it has helped to contribute to that thought or the perception of systemic racism, because you have certain schools where the race of the students is predominantly white, and then other schools where the race of the students is predominantly black. And that then perpetuates the sense that there is something organize and plan to make that happen. And the schools of choice was brought up numerous times as one of the concepts that is felt that is perpetuating that. As we moved on and asked the question, then what would you like to see in terms of the qualities and the leadership style of the new superintendent? And many participants mentioned that they want an instructional leader and someone that is able to hold people accountable, especially as it relates to the achievement gap. They want someone that's a good listener, while at the same time helping people to feel that their concerns are addressed without just talking about it, but doing something about it. But at the end of the day, they want somebody that has a firm hand. That word was used numerous times. And someone that makes a decision and then sticks to it, regardless of how the waves come in terms of whether people like it or don't like it. Once you have had a collaborative effort and make a collaborative decision, then it's the issue of the day is to stick to that decision. And several participants stated that they want a leader to light a fire under people when they need it and keep the fire going, even don't even bring in the fire department. Just let it go. And that was kind of an editorial comment, but it was stated. Many people thought that the collaborative work of working with unions and the teacher groups is very good to do, but at the end of the day, there's one leader. And the leader has to make the decisions, and everyone has to know who is the leader. And everyone needs to know that the leader then is the person that is guiding the district, and they want the leader to do just that. It doesn't mean that you don't listen. It doesn't mean that you don't collaborate, but at the end of the day, sometimes decisions have to be made, and sometimes the decision is no. And that no has to prevail. Sometimes the decision is yes, and especially at the community meeting, that concept was discussed several times. Bottom line, they would like to see that the new superintendent is someone that understands fiscal responsibility and wanting to continue to work to enhance the budget. They also wanted someone that understands facilities and wanted the facilities plan to continue to be implemented, and making sure that all of the schools are receiving the type of structure improvement that is necessary. Overall, I would say that you have individuals and groups that are willing to roll up their sleeves and work and help. You have individuals that feel good about the district in terms of having their children here. Nobody talked about having their children leave, but what they are really looking at is to have the systemic issues that are prevalent, that you already have talked about and begun to address, really get implemented. The issue of having things decided and then not followed through on was something that came up numerous times. They want to make sure that the root causes of why the issues prevail is addressed, and sometimes that takes very hard discussions. The issue of professional development came up numerous times. Professional development around equity versus equality, around systemic racism improvement is something that they really wanted to see for everyone. Many groups said not only for teachers, for administrators, building levels, central-wide, for board members, as well as for community members that would like to be involved across the board. Training that is extensive, not just a one-time shot, a continual effort. Training that is held in convenient times, at convenient places, across the community as well as within the school. Training for the students, especially those at the upper grade levels and at the high school. People were very serious about, and that's where the conversation came around, not wanting another committee. It's time to roll up our sleeves and do what we need to do and have some hard, tough, critical conversations that will then lead to success for students. They wanted to make sure that the positive sources of pride continue to be perpetuated in the district, that there are lots of things that people don't know that are taking place and they need to know, i.e. looking at your communications department and making sure that the good news gets out as well as bad news always is prevalent. But what are you doing to make sure that the good news is out there? So again, wanting to make sure that everyone knows all of the things that are taking place and then working on those issues that are a level of concern and that you know need to change. I'll stop with just that summary and see if there are any questions before we go on and look at the survey results. Questions or comments? I'll just keep going. Okay. What I would like the board to do is take a look at the document that says Superintendent Search Constituent Staff Board Survey Results. And what you have are all of the survey results compiled with the numbers. That's a document that has a grid. And basically the way, and there is another document that I gave to you that says the 33 characteristics report explanation. It kind of describes what I'm getting ready to describe of how the report was developed. But what you see here are just, you have one sheet that is the raw score sheet, and then you have another sheet that is the consultant ranking and recommendation sheet. And then I also gave you a single page with recommendations and considerations for the qualities that you would like to see in the next superintendent. And basically what this is a compilation of all the results from everyone that completed the survey, as well as you have another document that was sent to you containing the comments, every single comment that every single individual wrote, all 164 of them. So I want to let the public know all of those comments were shared with the Board of Education. But on the raw score sheet, you see indicated all of the responses from each of the groups that completed the survey. You see the responses from teachers, you see the responses from administrators, you see the responses from support staff, parents, and there were parents who filled the survey out in English as well as Spanish and French. You also see then the comments from you as board members, as well as the comments from non-parents, which would be community members who completed the survey. And basically the way, excuse me, the raw score sheet works is there were 33 qualities. Remember, you had 33 qualities that you had to read through and then select the top 10. I know some people felt, well, why do I get to just pick 10? Sometimes you have to narrow it down so that as we advertise and look for the next superintendent, the key qualities that you feel are very important for the success of Champaign need to be on the flyer. And while we could put a whole host of qualities on, we need to narrow it down. So that's the purpose of asking individuals to come up with the top 10. And then basically what you see then are the number of people that said they wanted either quality 1 or 2 or 3 all the way through 33, and the number of individuals that ranked that one a certain way. So you see the raw score and then you see the ranking. Like for example, quality 1, there were 31 people in the teacher group that selected that one, and that gave it a ranking of 6, and then so on across the board. And basically then what we do is then we just come up with an average, and that is how we then select the number of qualities that were considered by the majority of people, and then put that in the document. And then that would bring us to the single page. So you see at the very far right, those 33 qualities listed, and then you see the column right beside it, to the left slightly, the ranking of each one of those qualities. For example, number 1, willing to listen to input, but is a decision maker, was ranked overall number 4, and so on down the list. Has leadership to respond to challenges of ethnic and cultural diversity, that was ranked number 2. And that is how we develop the sheet. If you look at the second page, you will then see more clearly the recommended qualities with the word recommend indicated beside it slightly to the left, and then other qualities that we thought might need to be considered. And then that's how we came up with the single sheet. Nothing is in stone. This is just giving you the results of the survey and the results of the information. And I would like to now just call your attention to the single sheet that has the recommended qualities. That would just be this sheet, and then the qualities to consider, and we can discuss these and just get your impression and thought of what you would like to see as the Board of Education on the advertisement and the flyer that will be sent around the country. And while you're looking at that, I would just add, one of the things that Ray and Associates do is we have a database of people that we contact, so we will send information out to them. I have a list of people that I will be contacting by phone, because we're talking about individuals that are already employed, sitting superintendents, that we're going to go out and recruit. So this information will be sent to them. So it's critically important in terms of making sure that as they look at the application process, as they read and secure information about the district, that they are clearly understanding what you expect and would like to see in your next superintendent. So with that, I'll just engage President Armstrong in conversation around the list of recommendations and considerations in terms of qualities.
Thank you so much, Gloria. I just want to make sure everybody has the document in Zoom. Did you have the document, the single sheet? Bruce, Janina, Kathy? Okay. That was a lot. Thank you.
It is a lot. But it's something that this is one of the most important jobs you'll do. This is an important job. So it requires a lot, and it requires a lot of thoughtful consideration. You have a lot of input, and that's a good thing. And now we just need to put it in motion.
Okay, first, I guess we'll ask for question. I will ask this. Is there a way we can take this, kind of absorb it, and then give you feedback? You want it this
Tomorrow?
evening? Yeah, by tomorrow?
Yes, because
Okay.
we can do that. I would be interested to hear if there are any thoughts just initially now, but
I'm sure we do.
can-
I just want to make sure that we have some latitude.
We do, we can, and we want to get the advertisement out, though, in the next couple of days. So we want to make sure that we have plenty of time to follow the timeline that we have established, and I brought other copies of that. But as we discussed previously, the plan and the timeline as existing now is that the advertisement goes out on the 2nd of October, which is in a couple of days, and then the application process will continue through the end of November. And this is something I shared with every group I met with. And just to reiterate again, then the board will, after the process ends on the 29th of November, the board will hold their first series of, not interviews, but looking at candidates on the 16th of December. And at that time, I will bring a slate of candidates, probably anywhere from 10 to 12, that you will review. And that review will include looking at all of their paperwork, their resume, applications, references, background checks, and we do extensive background checks. And then we also will have videos, and each of those candidates will be answering 3 questions during that video. And then you will select from that slate of candidates on the 16th of December those that you would like to bring in for a face-to-face or a Zoom interview, whatever you decide, on the 4th of January. And then from the 4th of January, and that will usually be 5 or 6 individuals, and then from that group of candidates, you will narrow it down to your top 2, maybe 3, but usually your top 2 finalists, and bring them back on the 11th of January, with the goal of having a selection that you decide on by the end of January, no later than February 1.
Great. Thank you. Elizabeth, you had questions? I just saw your hand. Janina, Bruce, questions, comments? You've given us information all along. This is not new for us, I will say that.
Gloria,
Yes.
I'd like to see if you could do, Janina and I were talking in front of our house on a dog walk, but I thought about, there were certain words that came up a lot. Could you do a word cloud for some of this for us so that we could use it as a visual?
Okay.
The relief of seeing some words appear so many times made me think I'd never fully appreciated what a word cloud could do, but this might be one of those instances. So something I would like to see.
Okay, we can definitely do that. Because there were certain words and concepts that came up over and over.
I'm not sure how people do it. I'm sure engineers are involved, but I'm very grateful that they figured it out. So someone knows how to do that.
Yes.
I'd like to echo that. That I really, really appreciate the fact that our community is emphasizing the role of systemic racism and acknowledging the harm that is being done, and calling loudly and across the board for bold steps to address root causes. And I'm so pleased that your surveys and interviews have brought that out. I really appreciate your work on this.
Oh, well, thank you. It was the most prevalent theme throughout every group, students included.
Okay, we're all on the same page with that. I do like the recommend that you have pulled out of what the community states, aligns with really a lot of what the board stated, and then I actually like the considerations to be included. Is there enough room there?
There is, there's no in number of how many qualities we can have or how extensive they can be. We do like to try to keep it on one flyer, and sometimes if we have more, we can adjust pictures and certain things, but nothing is in stone. So it's open to whatever you feel is best.
Okay.
This is just a draft to kind of get the conversation and the thinking going.
Elizabeth?
So I admit I didn't bring my flyer out with me. I thought we were supposed to leave it back there, so you don't have it.
I do
Thank you. Let me
have it.
Oh.
I have it somewhere.
Yeah.
What do I do with it?
Wanted to double check
There
before
it
I
is.
say this out loud.
And the qualities are, there you go.
Yeah. So
And they're the same ones on some of them are
yes,
that are on this sheet.
definitely. And this is something that I think requires board discussion. Gloria, earlier today I emailed you about how in looking at these recommended items, before I understood how it was compiled, I said, these are great, wonderful qualities, but has the leadership capability to successfully advance and monitor the district anti-racism resolution. I expressed concern that because the anti-racism was said so many times in the survey responses and in what you're saying, it feels like it should be prevalent in more than just one recommendation. I now understand how these were developed, but I still feel strongly about having it said in more ways. Is it possible, and in addition to that, when we say dismantling systemic racism, our vision has been bigger than that. It has been racial and education justice, and that's part of our mission, vision, and value statement. Is it possible that, and I guess maybe this is what I'm asking the board, could those words be on this sheet in very clear wording? Someone who's passionate about or has experience implementing something racial and education justice.
I think we have to pass the strategic plan for that language to appear on this. So isn't that a step tonight?
Yeah, so we haven't adopted the strategic plan with that new mission and
Which
vision,
includes
so
the
those are placeholders.
I understand.
Okay, gotcha.
I understand, but when we pass it or whatnot, is the board
Agreed.
Agreed.
good with those exact words being on
Yes.
this?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay.
Okay, we can definitely do that.
Okay.
I see Bruce nodding. Janina? Yeah. I think you've got the go-ahead to really utilize that
Okay.
predominantly. And I know you
We
had
talked about that.
Yeah, we talked about that earlier. We also talked about making sure that it's prevalent within the job description, that it's part when they come to search for it on the website, that pops right up.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. And you do have under recommended, it doesn't totally address what you are referring to, Elizabeth, but you have the statement commitment to and experience working with all genders, races, and socioeconomic groups.
Yes.
Which, and we can still add to this. Like I said, these statements can be as long or as brief as you choose.
Would Dr. Baker, do you think maybe that might be a good place to say something like from a critical race lens or critical race theory lens? What in your spheres in higher ed, how is that incorporated? What might be some other ways we could incorporate that here?
Right now, I would like to see the document as with all of the information, at least that Gloria has provided. I think that, I mean, we got the comments a little bit before, but we didn't get some of this other information until today, and I don't know that I have a comment on much of this as of now.
I think, Gloria, if you could take what you have, develop the flyer now that we're going to approve the strategic plan, make it look, give us the draft document updated
Okay.
as it will look, and then if you send that to us, then we can recommend changes back to you. Just
Okay.
kind of like today, individually, we can all give you back, but I'm assuming as you've experienced, even though you told us not to talk to each other, and we didn't, we all said the same things. We were aligned in what our purpose is.
You were.
So I
And I was
think,
pretty explicit about that.
so I think if you take that, create the draft, kick it back to us, then we'll give us a turnaround time for feedback, and then we can give that back to you to get this printed in a timely fashion.
Okay.
Does that sound like a plan,
We can do
board?
that. We can do that.
Okay.
Mhm.
That's funny.
I know. I know it wasn't big enough. One of the things is we printed. We had to print it, and it didn't come out as large as we like. But point well taken, because I can't hardly read it either.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay. I think you have some guidance from us. We'll look forward
I
to
do,
seeing
I
a
do.
draft.
Okay.
We appreciate you so much.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate being here.
And that community meeting is October 20th, 6 o'clock at Jefferson.
Jefferson.
And there's also a virtual link, a Zoom link for those, because it will have to adhere to social distancing. And I know that information's going out. It's also on our website, and I'll announce it again here at the meeting. So there will be another opportunity for community feedback.
Okay, and I will be back at that time. I will say at the community meetings and with some of the groups, I gave my cell number and email, and people have used it. I'll just leave it at that.
Okay. Good. Feedback is good.
Yes, one gentleman's like, Miss Gloria, are you busy? I'm like, okay. But the whole purpose is, I will just say in closing, you want people to feel that the whole process is transparent and that their thoughts and their ideas are listened to and utilize in terms of formulating the overall process and the applications procedure, if you will, as we move forward. And that's what we really want people to feel. So, and I feel pretty strongly about that.
Great. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Okay, so I'm going to get up out of this seat and leave it for somebody else.
Orlando, while you're getting settled, we'll take a 5-minute break to use the restroom.
Yes, yes, yes.
So this moves us to agenda item B, which is our board resolution update, and Mr. Orlando Thomas is here to present. Thank you, Mr. Thomas.
All right. Good evening to the board. I am excited to be able to provide the first district level update as it relates to the resolution. When Dr. Zola told me that I was presenting first, my items are 9 and 10, and I thought that we would go in order. But no, happy to present. I view the resolution as a great opportunity for us to rethink and revisit the work that we do here in the district. We have done a lot and tried a lot, and when you don't see the outcomes that you are expecting, this is an opportunity to revisit. I love the fact that we are bringing community members, board members, and students to the table to help us create plans. Our students and families are counting on us. They depend on us. Our schools are safe havens for many of our struggling students. So this is an opportunity for us to make sure that we are providing the necessary supports to make sure that they are successful. Part of our strategic plan included restructuring of responsibilities at central office. And the 4 areas highlighted in yellow are the 4 main areas of my roles and responsibilities. The first 2, the SEL work, as well as creating a multi-tier systems of support plan, both align nicely with the resolution, which means that we are not doing extra work, we're doing work that is aligned. Collaboration and alignment, we want to make sure that we are doing a better job of connecting with our other central office departments and administrators to provide supports for our traditionally underserved student groups. And we've heard repeatedly schools of choice, and Dr. Zola and I will have an update to the board via some 2-on-2 meetings to provide some of the updates that we have done yet this year as it relates to schools of choice. I will not read the resolution, but these are the 2 areas that I will be addressing this evening, and we'll be talking certainly about work around the Discipline Advisory Committee, safety committees, MTSS, and then our plans for our school resource officers. To achieve the goals of the resolution, I wholeheartedly believe that we need to have a comprehensive approach. So we certainly need MTSS, which provides a systemic way to make sure that we are consistently providing research-based interventions and supports to our students and families. The SEL work allows us to make sure that the social and emotional well-being of our students is being addressed on a daily basis. We do have district-adopted curriculum, and so we're using this year as an opportunity to create plans to make sure that that curriculum is implemented with fidelity, so that we can then properly assess, do we have the right curriculum as it relates to providing SEL support for our students and families. Making sure that families are included in all of our processes, knowing that when students struggle, families are also struggling. So making sure that we're wrapping around the family as we think about supports. Involving our community with the understanding that we can certainly not do this work alone. We have lots of community partners interested in helping. We already have existing partnerships, but what are some ways to better align the community support that we have to make sure that we don't have any students falling or slipping through the gaps? And then last, safety. We want to make sure that we are providing a safe learning environment for our students and families. So tonight I will provide just a brief overview of some initial work in 4 of those 5 areas. So mentioned in the resolution is work with the Discipline Advisory Committee as well as the Safety Advisory Committee. Those committees just met for the first time in September. So the 3-year plan are ideas and thoughts that I created over the summer to give the group some initial thoughts so that we had a framework, something to work from. The group is now reviewing all of these options in year 1, 2, and 3, with the hopes that we will finalize the plan, the 3-year plan that will be brought forward to the Board of Education. And so while this is a 3-year plan, we also know that we need to operate with a true sense of urgency. And so there are certainly things already happening. There's lots of planning that needs to happen, because some of this work certainly cannot happen overnight, but we do have some initiatives that are already happening yet this year, and I'll share those shortly. I did want to provide a brief overview of multi-tiered systems of support. And so all campuses have supports at the universal level. This is around classroom management, building positive relationships with students. The hope is that 75 to 85% of your students will find success at the universal level. 10 to 15% of students may not respond and need an additional level of support. Those are selected at-risk students, and we look at small group instruction and strategies to meet the needs of those students. Tier 3 is where the intensive work happens. This is always a small percentage of students, 3 to 5% of students. You see the arrow on the right side where it states that intensity and frequency of progress monitoring and interventions increases as the student needs increase. So in a true system, as students show that they need more help, you don't exclude those students. You don't use disciplinary techniques. You use strategic supports to help those students. The size of those instructional groups, as you can see on the left-hand side, decrease as you move up the tiers, because you want to make sure that you are providing that student, that intensive student at Tier 3, one-on-one intensive support. This is an example on the right side of some components that you may see in a universal plan, some components you may see in a Tier 2 plan, and components you may see at a Tier 3, in Tier 3. Our goal, one of our goals, is to make sure that restorative practices are embedded at all 3 tiers. That is specifically listed in the resolution, and that is something that we want to make sure that we provide. So at all 3 levels, restorative practices will be at the heart and implemented. On the left side, you will see our district data as you think about out-of-school suspensions as it relates to the number of students that are responding at the universal level, the number of students at Tier 2, and the number of students at Tier 3. If you look at those numbers, you'd say, wow, the district's numbers align perfectly with this MTSS system. So what are the challenges? The challenges are we need to do a better job of wrapping more intensive support around students at Tier 2 and Tier 3. We also know that 73% of those students at Tier 2 and Tier 3 are African American students. We know that 38% of our student population are Black, and so there is the disparity, 73%. To do this work around the MTSS system, we have partnered with Illinois Multi-Tiered Systems of Support. They provide a systems approach. They make sure that you are using data to drive all of your decisions. They make sure that you are using evidence-based practices. They are available for coaching. They're available to provide technical assistance, and all of that support can be either online or in person. So we'll be working with our campuses to find out where they're at on the continuum, what type of support they might need either from the district or from the network, and make sure that we provide that support for them. So what has happened thus far as it relates to MTSS? So we hired 3 counselors at the middle level, 1 at each campus, and this is specifically to support students at Tier 2 and Tier 3. We've hired social workers at Garden Hills, BTW, and Stratton for the exact same purpose. We want to make sure that we revisit the goals.
Additional, not replacement.
additional.
Additional FTE, thanks.
Yes. We want to make sure that we review Senate Bill 100, which was adopted in 2016. Senate Bill 100 provided a comprehensive overview for all 800-plus school districts in the state of Illinois. It focuses on providing interventions for students, implementing restorative practices with the hope of keeping students in school versus out of school. It eliminated zero-tolerance policies, eliminated progressive discipline, minimizes the amount of time students are spent out of school. We have included restorative practices in our student code of conduct as some of our district level changes. This year, we will also be transitioning to online discipline referrals. One of the purposes of transitioning is to provide administrators an opportunity to not only identify which students need support, but to also develop behavior success plans that are tracked, meaning I, at the district level, can look at who has behavior plans in every school in the district to make sure the duration of the plan is sufficient, to make sure those that are responsible for implementing the plan are implementing the plan, and then most importantly, is the plan working? We know that 1% of our students generate a lot of our discipline, and we also have a small percentage of teachers writing the referrals. So another initiative that will be implemented this year is using Restore the Respect. Andine Gross, a retired school psychologist from Centennial High School, actually wrote a book called Mediation in Schools, Restore the Respect, that highlights all of the work that she completed at Centennial High School. And so to make this work, teachers have to be in agreement to have this mediation. When it works, you don't wait until the student gets 10 or 15 referrals from one teacher. We can set the metrics. Is it 3 referrals? Is it 5 referrals? What her data shows is that when that student and teacher get an opportunity to come together, they learn a lot about each other. What are my triggers? Well, when I come late every day, if you did not address me or yelled at me in front of the class, then I may not scream at you and you won't dismiss me every day. 86% of students that participated in student-teacher mediations did not receive a subsequent discipline referral. So we're going to use that as a book study to help our students and teachers rebuild some relationships so that they can coexist in that space together without that student being dismissed often. As we think about MTSS and restorative practice models, we have several schools here locally that have implemented both plans. We're going to provide campuses with a model so that they know a perfect model. This is what it looks like. We will be having our schools complete an assessment. Illinois MTSS Network has an assessment. This allows campuses to know where they're at on the continuum. And then a couple years ago, we worked with IBARS, Illinois Balanced and Restorative Justice Project, to develop an implementation guide that we will also have campuses look at to determine what types of things they need to get towards full implementation as it relates to restorative practices. Dr. Taylor will lead that work with the school improvement teams to develop professional development plans to make sure that those practices are implemented in year 2. Our actions program, we are in year 7 of our actions program, and we have expanded the work of the actions team. We have now added an APEX option, so students that are not accepted at NOVAC now have an option to attend the actions program to still have access to APEX. 2 years ago, we opened two Restore classrooms, a K2 and a 3-5 classrooms for elementary students, Tier 3 elementary students not finding success. We continue to do social academic instructional groups and SEL lessons, and we continue to house the traditional alternative to suspension program. So when students are suspended and they make that mistake, they have an opportunity to have access to their schoolwork and they're not sitting at home. So this second semester, we will look at, is it time to revisit what actions does? Do we narrow the approach? Do we do more proactive and have the staff members out in schools leading SEL lessons and providing support? Do we do half and half, or do we continue with our current model? So we'll certainly revisit that. Here is the book that Andine Gross wrote, and she's got just some great data, so looking forward to implementing this with our campuses as well. Now, another area is making sure that our students have a safe environment. Now, first semester initiatives, we have created a district crisis management plan focusing on 3 areas. The district response to crisis, and this is a systematic approach, so when things happen at the central office, we know who's responsible and how we make sure that that crisis is certainly handled in an effective and timely manner. School messaging, we are collaborating with Champaign Police Department on some messaging that we can send out without their approval. So when a major incident happens, we often have to wait for their approval, and depending on what's going on, that can take some time. So right now we have several messages that we need approval from Champaign Police Department that we can send out just to let families, teachers know that we are aware of the situation. As we get more information, we can share that. And then providing some clarity regarding lockdown procedures at school, both soft and hard lockdown procedures. We have developed an SRO ad hoc committee to survey our students, parents, teachers, do some focus group instructions, and then that team will also create and provide some alternatives to school resource officers. So second semester initiatives, if the contract is renewed, we'll make sure that we revisit the procedures to make sure that SROs are only involved in violent situations, which is listed in the resolution, and the contract is not renewed, we will have some alternatives to school resource officers that we can begin implementing yet the second semester. Here's an overview of the SRO plans. We will be presenting to the Board of Education on November 9th. I believe the board will be voting at the December 14th meeting. Dr. Zola already provided an overview of the committee members, but we have great representation to make sure that we are reaching a diverse group. And then on the right, you simply see the game plan to make sure that we hear from all of our collective groups and are prepared to present to the board in November. Social and emotional learning, we hired 20 combined counselors, social workers, and administrators to create an SEL plan for both elementary and secondary. We'll be reviewing Tier 2 supports to create additional options, as well as Tier 3 supports for families that might need wraparound support. Second semester initiatives, we will review the implementation of the current plan with the school improvement leadership teams to ask, is this sufficient? Is our current curriculum meeting the needs of our students, or do we need to revisit the curriculum? The next section is on community involvement. First semester initiatives, Cunningham Children's Home, we work closely with Patricia Eggy. They have reinstituted 3 programs. Family Strong Together is formally parenting with Love and Logic, which was very well received. It's an opportunity for both the student and family to work together to create a game plan for both school and home life to make sure that that student is getting a consistent message and the family is on board. They have reopened a homeless and runaway shelter for students that might be facing significant challenges, and then ongoing counseling support for students that might need it. Now, a new initiative, the Regional Office of Education just shared a new program called GED Restart. The program focuses on students aged 16 to 19 that might be having challenges with truancy, that are potential dropouts because they are behind in credit. So this is designed for the students 16, 17 with less than 7 credits, that going the traditional route would take an additional 2 to 4 years, which is certainly that's when students begin to lose hope. So this is going to provide an option for those students. If they join GED Restart, they will get support through the attendance improvement team. They will have opportunities for workforce development and an opportunity to participate in a competency-based education, which is a unique way for them to earn credits outside of the traditional classroom. And then we'll continue to provide support from the family, homeless support, clothing, transportation, some of those basic needs. Second semester initiatives, we will continue to collaborate with Katina and Andy O'Neill to discuss additional community supports for students and families. We are going to review some data from our Youth Assessment Center, something that the district has been involved with. We want to look at that data, talk to some of the students that have been a part of that. Is this working? Get some feedback and determine if this is a viable option as we think about supports for our students. We want to create a contact list to create a youth advisory board to connect both district and community programs. So we have lots of things that we offer students here in our district. Operation Hope Junior, Go Getters, the YES program, Lead for Life. Right now, we don't have a systemic way to know which program students are involved in. And then there's lots of community partnerships that we have. So this youth advisory board will meet to determine what programs are available and how can we make sure that students are not falling through the gaps, that we are not duplicating services, so that to make sure that the programs that students are involved with, they're finding success. This is the way that I plan to track the progress of this. Dr. Zola did like this and said that we could possibly use this as the district model for all of the areas of the strategic plan. So you're going to certainly set what is the objective in each area, provide some specific measures and metrics. How do we know if this is working? And not wait until year 3 to say this is not working. We'll have specific strategies with who is responsible for each initiative at the end of each year. And this will ensure that at the end of each year, we're able to monitor and track the progress. And I will open it up for questions if we have any.
Mr. Brown?
Yeah, one question. First of all, thank you, Orlando, for that report. I mean, I heard so much in terms of what you all are doing and what you all have on deck to implement. That is, I mean, it's the type of action that I know I've been looking for, and the board has been, even before our resolution. So it's nice to see some of those, former ideas and concepts to come to life in this new plan. My question is, in terms of the wraparound services from that you mentioned, for our students who have intensive needs, the things that you presented tonight, are they independent of the partnership that we were forming with the city of Champaign? Or is this a description of that initiative? I know once COVID hit, we hadn't kind of lost contact and kind of lost some traction with that partnership. But again, is this, what you present tonight, is it independent of the work we were trying to do with the city, or is this just a manifestation of those initial conversations and partnership?
Yeah, great question, Bruce, and it could be either. We need some direction regarding if the board is interested in revisiting the Lift Champaign option. If so, that is where some of the wraparound support and work would occur. If we don't revisit that, it is something that is such a high need that it's something that the district still needs to make happen with or without the Lift Champaign option.
So just to clarify, we would probably be going it alone, considering the budgetary cuts the city. Is that, or have you asked if they're still interested?
Dr. Zola may have an update.
Yeah, I talked to Dorothy David. They are still very interested in a collaboration, but the support may come in other ways other than finances right now. But I think they were at the table for over a year with our staff, and I think the needs are still real, if not more apparent now.
Do you have any other questions, Bruce? Not yet. Dr. Baker? I had a couple. I was glad that you mentioned a survey that will be going out to, but I was thinking, when we talk about rebuilding trust with our community and our students and our staff, we used a survey done by an outside entity for the referendum work. And even today, people, when we were reading survey results, they didn't like how it was worded. So I want us to be cautious that we aren't creating surveys that get us the answer we want. So we saw that when I had to go back and look up his name. It was Dr. Wright did the referendum work for us with the survey. And I wonder if that's a consideration, that we go to an outside entity to build those surveys, take that onus off of the committee, that this is a professionally done survey that gets us the accuracy of the answer, not necessarily putting out questions that get us what we may not get to the reality of it. And then you can rebuild trust, because that's an unbiased, when he presented those results to us at the referendum level, we were shocked because it's not what we expected. But it could be a way to say, this isn't, Orlando didn't create this. This person with an agenda didn't create that. This person, I'm thinking of a way that we can say, this was done by an outside, unbiased source to get us the information accurately. And I'm not saying you wouldn't do it otherwise, but it could be a good step to trust building at this level around the surveying. And I don't even know what that would cost. If that's cost prohibitive, it might be, but it's just a thought that I had to send back. When you talk about FBAs, the behavior analysis, and you talk about behavior plan, is that a BIP? Is that still the same SPED?
Yes.
Interesting. Okay. So that's a behavior intervention plan that you would build that, and then there's a team that surrounds that.
Yep.
Okay. I like that you're tracking staff who write DRs. So something that we talk about a lot with justice is, if discipline is going to follow our students, it's my opinion, and it's just my opinion, that the discipline should follow the teacher, and we don't carry it year to year, but at least you're tracking who's delivering these DRs. And then you can find out if there's an issue between a student and a staff member.
Exactly.
Okay. And who writes DRs? Does anybody in the district write discipline referrals?
Anyone can. I think it depends on where the incident occurs. If there's an incident in the hallway, it could be a hall monitor, but the majority of the referrals are from our classroom teachers.
Okay. All right. Professional development, again, we're hearing that across settings, professional development. So when you talk about implementing these restorative practices that we want to be mandatory, how are we training the staff to participate in those?
So I think first we need to do an initial assessment. We do have campuses that are at different places on the continuum. Some will need more training than others. That's where Laura's work, Dr. Taylor's work with the school improvement leadership teams, they will determine how much and what types of training that they need to get to full implementation.
Okay.
And our professional development is planned a year in advance. And so I think someone asked, well, why can't this happen now? The PD that's happening now was planned last year. So we're planting that seed now for PD to happen, and this is a priority. So Dr. Taylor will prioritize this with her school improvement leadership teams to make sure that there's a PD plan for restorative practices and MTSS for next school year.
Okay. And I do appreciate the fact that you bring about communication, because I do know that it hits social media long before we are ever able to address it, because the police department doesn't want us to say something. So it would be helpful if we had some targeted communication to get in front of that. Because, we've had it where people are calling us from campuses, and I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about, because it's already hit social media before we can ever get out in front of it from a communication point of view. So that, to me, is critical. Again, back to the trust building. And when we talk about this, one of the biggest complaints we hear from teachers is cell phones. and how students are completely checked out or they can't do anything about it. Is there a way to bring that into the same conversation?
There is. The Discipline Advisory Committee would be the group that would review that. We did bring students to the table when we changed the policy 4 years ago, and we had students help us. Okay, so what's a happy medium? Because students said, we polled parents, and parents said, no, my kid needs their cell phone, so you can't turn them completely off, and you can't confiscate it because that's my mode of communication for my student, before or after school or checking in with them at lunch. So what was shared, and it came from the students, was that the students would be able to self-monitor the use of cell phones, so they can use them in the hallways during passing periods, and prior to them entering the classrooms, the phones would be put away. At the elementary level, the cell phones are not allowed at all. In middle school, they're only allowed during lunch, not even during passing periods should cell phones be displayed. So it's a tiered model, elementary, middle, and high. And the implementation of that, of course, looks different. It was 4 years ago. We know that technology continues to expand, but the Discipline Advisory Committee would be the group that would revisit that policy, and I would certainly want to bring students, teachers to the table for that discussion.
Yeah, because that's who's being affected. And my last one was, I was thinking about goal getters, because you mentioned them here. And I know, just from feedback from city staff, that because that's part of their initiative as well, is that a lot of the goal getters are meeting virtually, and they are seeing results there, and they're actually seeing more of their kids virtually. Is there a way that we can give them class credit for participating in that space? I know Sheldon does that. Is there a way that they can get credit for that toward graduation?
We do have the CBE grant, competency-based education grant. Dr. Taylor and I have not explored the implementation of that yet, but that is the intent of CBE, is to provide credit for unique opportunities such as the one you just mentioned.
Okay. Elizabeth, you have questions?
Amy, before we move
Yeah,
on,
I'm sorry.
I do want to go back to the survey. One of the reasons that we expanded the group is that I think we have people in support, people in the middle, and people that want an alternative. And so I am confident that the survey questions, like I'm not creating them, the group will create them, and the goal of the group creating them is that so they are objective and unbiased, because I don't think anyone has an agenda. We want the survey to produce true results of how people feel. So I would like the opportunity to allow this group, because we have such a broad representation, to move forward with the surveys. We are on a tight time frame as well, so also
Okay.
trying to find someone to do this type of work at this point.
Yeah, I don't want to interrupt anything. It was something that I think about just across the district. It could be a consideration to having those reviewed and maybe done by an unbiased source. Just a thought. I don't want to interrupt any work. Elizabeth, did you have any questions?
And this is my fault because I missed this. The group, is that formatted the same way as the SRO ad hoc committee group that was at the beginning of the presentation, or?
Which group are you referencing?
The group that you're referencing.
That's the SRO ad hoc.
Okay, so that the SRO ad hoc is not only having conversations around, do we have SROs, do we not have SROs, but it's more like, it's bigger than that. They're talking about other forms of.
Absolutely.
Got it,
Part
okay.
of that group's work is to present some alternatives that we have also explored prior to coming here. So if that group says we'd like to explore hiring 5 more counselors, we're going to talk to Ken. Is that possible? Seriously, we're going to have there's a financial component. Is this a high-risk area, meaning we can't find counselors, so we won't bring something that we don't feel that we can implement yet the second semester.
Okay, cool. So my question is more of an open question, because I don't think I've never asked you this. When you visualize what a good health, safety, discipline plan would look like. What kind of outcomes do you envision? What to you would look like, yeah, this is either this specific program is working or all these changes, now I can see that this is working?
There has to be a data component, meaning you want to see the data shift. But as I think about a successful plan, I would hope that if we were doing this with fidelity, that if we asked any student, do they have someone in the school that they are connected with? Do they feel accepted and respected? That every student would be able to say yes. That our district would be able to say, regardless whatever behaviors that a student exhibited, that we have a systemic way that we are tracking and monitoring to say, here's what we have done, and it's for an extended period. When I think of interventions, we're talking 6 to 9 weeks of implementing interventions. You know, oftentimes people say, well, I've done it for a week. If we could change it in a week, we wouldn't be here having that conversation. It takes time, it takes consistency, and you have to use your data, and we'll let you know if a intervention is working. And so we don't look at the student, we look at the intervention. Research will tell you 80% of your students should be responding to any intervention. If not, it's not a student issue, it's an issue with your intervention. So those are the types of conversations we want to have with our campuses to make sure that they understand the model. And it also takes staff to do these initiatives. So right now, we don't have counselors at the elementary level. So to implement this, staff members have to agree. If, say, a campus says, I want to hire, or not hire, recruit 10 mentors, that may require each teacher to give up one lunch period per week to make sure that each student has a mentor. So right now, people would ask for more staff, and in a perfect model, I think the people that are there would invest, and maybe it's you come in a half hour early to do a mediation with the student that you're having problems with. Maybe you give up one of your plan periods to go and watch a student in a different setting that they're having success. I think there are lots of ways, but as I think about a perfect model, those are some of the components that I would love to see.
Thank you.
Any other questions, board? Kathy?
Amy, I had a couple.
Go ahead, Kathy.
So I was wondering, this isn't a question for tonight. One of the things that I don't feel like I have a handle on is I would love to see some data, some cohort data on the results of kids who have been to Actions Restore, the new APEX program, and the Youth Assessment Center. And I would like to see that data presented regularly so we can look at, we feel like some of these programs are having success, but I don't feel like I have a good handle on exactly how successful. And I know we have to be careful around student confidentiality, and these are very small numbers, so I would I would respect that we have to be careful about that, but I would really like to see and to see us publicize what we think is working, and if something isn't working, why do we think it isn't working?
Yep, we can certainly provide that.
Okay, and my other question was kind of building on Ms. Soteropoulos' question, talking about, a perfect system. One of the things I would love to see in a perfect system is bringing back some of the students that that have been having a very hard time in our system. Some of the students who've received Tier 3 interventions and doing kind of debriefings with them or exit interviews or whatnot, and really trying to understand, what do you think worked? What do you think didn't work? What could we do differently with a younger you or with you next year if they haven't yet graduated? Sometimes I think our students surprise us when we ask them, because maybe we don't do enough to ask them what's working and what we can do differently.
Kathy, I'm certainly not opposed, but in addition to that, I would also like to interview current students that are involved in multiple interventions that are also not finding success. I think there's value in both, but we have current students that are involved in multiple interventions where schools are doing their best and that kid is still not finding success.
Absolutely. And I would love to hear more of their voices. Like, again, I totally want to respect student confidentiality. I would love to, if we could sometime, have someone do an open-ended conversation with these kids and say, we'd like to bring your comments to the board. Can you tell us why you don't think you're having success? Can you tell us if there's something more that we could do to help you? What would success look like for you? I would love to see that brought to the board so that we can have a more direct line to the problems that keep a lot of us up at night.
Thanks, Kathy. We finished. Bruce, you good? Heather, Kathy? Okay. Thank you so much, Orlando, for staying with us and presenting. This was a wealth of information, and we appreciate it. That will... That will move us to item C, which is administrator and teacher salaries. And I will turn this over to you, Mr. King-Kleber.
Good evening. So the Illinois School Code requires us to report certain administrator and teacher salaries and benefits by October 1st of each year. So we are meeting that deadline and present it at a school board meeting before we post it on our website. And we are meeting that deadline this evening. So to do this, we actually work with a system that ISB provides. It's called EIS, Employment Information System. We generate a report using the parameters in that system. And so we get questions from time to time, right, that certain people are not on here and certain positions are not on here, and that's correct. ISB, their guidelines, there are certain categories of employees, so our instructional coaches, counselors, social workers, psychologists, non-licensed administrators, et cetera, are not included, but that's by design from ISB. And so after it's presented this evening, we will post that on our website, and we will also upload it to ISB, which is also required. There is a separate report that we are required to post under the Open Meetings Act of total compensation for each employee if it exceeds $75,000. And so I know the board was having some budget discussions this evening, and we will comply with that posting requirement as well. This is merely informational. It's our standard report every year this time. And of note, this is for last year's data.
Thank you, Mr. Kleber. Any questions? Okay. Thank you, Ken. That will move us to item D, second quarter planning. We'll turn this over to you, Dr. Zola.
Good evening again. I'm actually going to start, Tammy, with the other, the data set, please, if you don't mind. While they're pulling up the data from the initial getting a pulse on what our families were thinking, I want to just read a little bit of an opening that I sent to our staff earlier today. Dear colleagues, I recognize that the last several weeks has created a great deal of stress. I recognize that everyone is working hard to support our students and their families. I hear daily via phone and email about our teachers and support staff and what they're doing to support our students. I hear that as hard as it has been to get started, we are just beginning to figure it all out, and we need to stay the course. I hear those voices. I also hear daily from families that the distance learning model is not working. They have Wi-Fi, they have a computer, they have school supplies and headphones. Most have created a space to help support their child. But for a variety of reasons, it is not working. Some are connected to academic issues, and most are more specific to the social and emotional well-being of their child. They have begged and pleaded for a conversation about offering some in-person instruction for the second quarter. Let me repeat. These are families who are begging for a conversation and pleading, and they ask to at least have the conversation. So tonight, on their behalf, I will have that conversation. The board is not being asked to approve a plan this evening. The board gave the superintendent the authority to make decisions regarding reopening in August. So that is on my watch. What I will do this evening is walk through the efforts since September 8th and then open it up for conversations around board feedback. So the first set of slides that the board has seen and is posted on our website is simply our initial pulse on what families were thinking. We received 5,842 responses. We serve around 9,991 of our students. It simply was a, what is it that families might be hoping for second quarter? And through each slide, you will see literally almost a 50-50 split on return and distance. Responses by level, you can see that we had 55% of our early childhood families were seeking to some form of in-person, and 45% wanted to remain distance for second quarter. Elementary, 51.7 of our elementary families that responded were seeking a form of in-person, and 48.3 would like to remain distance. Middle school, 45.4% of our families were asking to return to some form of in-person, 54.6 wanted to stay remote. And high school, 52.9% of our high school families were seeking a form of some form of return to in-person, and 47.1. As you go to the next set of slides, we tried to break it down by our ethnic groups, and obviously this is self-reported. And again, you can see quickly that our African American families, 49.1% wanted some form of in-person, 50.9 said they would like to stay distance. Hispanic and or Latinx families, literally a 50-50 split. Two or more races, 51.6, 48.4. Thank you. And again, when you look at the total responses, 50.8 are seeking some form of a return to in-person, and 49.2 would like to stay in a distance model. If you go to the next slide, the number of students that self-reported as free reduced lunch, again, the percentages are right in the 50-50. 51.3% of the families were seeking a return option. 48.7 were requesting to stay distance. And non-free reduced lunch, 50.6 were seeking a return, and 49.4. Again, total responses, 50.8 of those families were seeking a return, and 49.2 would ask to stay in a distance model. Finally, a shout out to our EL parent liaisons. Viadelda and her team made a lot of phone calls to make sure we were capturing some of the voices of our multilingual families. And you can see that in their responses, we only got about 35% of the 803, but of those, 54.4 were seeking a return option, and 45.6 were asking to stay distance learning. So I just provide that. I know the board has seen that data, but I wanted to provide that as we frame our conversations moving forward. So I would ask if we could go ahead and switch to the presentation. Thank you. So the phase one has really been the work since, honestly, last May, when we started having conversations about what might the fall look like. As the board remembers, I brought some plans that the board provided feedback and the community provided feedback, and distance learning was our first step, and I think it was still the right decision at the time due to a variety of concerns. Students, families, and staff worked heroically and continue to work heroically to make distance learning a success during the first quarter. Distance learning was successful for some of our students and families, and as I articulated at the beginning, not everyone has benefited, and many are still struggling. And again, that's not by any fault of any individual or by the effort of our staff and teachers. It is honestly just the reality of families and their needs. Starting in late August, we began opening up student support centers to help students and families, initially really technically related. And last week, we opened up some expanded student support centers at Stratton Academy of the Arts. So it was kind of, if you think of first quarter, it was kind of our 1.25 transition, right? The student support centers give us an opportunity to bring students into the buildings and work on their distance learning. Staff and volunteers help students reconnect with their teachers and classmates with technology issues, providing interpreters, nursing staff. The Student Support Center at Stratton allowed us an opportunity to model and practice our health and safety protocols, including busing procedures, wearing masks, maintaining 6 feet of social distancing, hand sanitizing, and cleaning. And seeing students in person was super exciting. I kind of went over every day because I was missing our students. I think we might have a video that we can play, I believe. Yep, great. We need some sound. Yep.
As we consider ways to bring students back to in-person learning, Unit 4 has safety at the top of the list. During this period of distance learning, Unit 4 has worked to engage communities through student support centers, ensuring they have what they need to succeed. This included busing some of our students to those support centers for additional help. Here is an overview of what that process looks like as we think about bringing students back into the classroom. Before students board the bus, they must be wearing a mask. While on the bus, students are spaced out to ensure social distance, with no more than 35 students on the bus. After each trip, the bus is thoroughly sanitized with an electrostatic sprayer. This includes every seat on the bus, the handrails to enter the bus, the windows, the bus driver's seat and steering wheel, and the door opener. Once in our buildings, students will notice we have marked off spaces on the floors and throughout the building to ensure social distancing. We have also marked off sinks in the bathrooms and created sanitizing stations throughout each building. In the classroom, desks have been spaced 6 feet apart. All spaces within the building will follow a cleaning schedule. As we continue the reopening discussion, Unit 4 is centering our attention on ensuring the health and safety of our students and staff comes first.
Thank you. And we'll jump back to beginning to talk about the next phase and the conversations. You saw the data that was shared at the beginning. Prior to that, and it's kind of the bullet at the bottom of this particular slide, and I'll just read to you September 8th's email out to my colleagues, my principals, and I asked them, dear colleagues, I've enjoyed getting to see many of the teachers and staff back in the building. We have a lot of teachers working in our buildings. I interact with them. They have a very positive mindset about problem solving, which has allowed many of the students to find early success. I reminded them that I had promised the Board of Education I would return with a recommendation and a conversation regarding learning for second quarter by the end of September. I'm seeking feedback from as many voices across the district as possible over the next several weeks to guide my recommendation. To assist in gathering this feedback, I'm asking for each building to do the following. Convene either a current or new building team composed of the representative voices below. Consider using your reopening team, your building council, parent group,